Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. We're in a weird... It's fine. It's fine. Okay, 5, I don't want to hold you. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. I found a friend and we read Ecclesiastes chapter 2.
Okay.
Let's jump in.
All right, so Ecclesiastes chapter number 2. Chapter 1 is basically an intro. We're remembering who Solomon is. By the time you get to chapter number 2, Solomon is looking for the grand question of what is the meaning of life? Now, here's what happens. He begins by into chapter 1, early into chapter 2, this grand experiment to try to figure out where he can find meaning in his life. Now, probably what's happened in this book is that Solomon, he can have his life and his works really divided into 3 sections. First of all, Solomon wrote the Song of Solomon in his youth. He wrote it when he was young, he wrote it when he was in love, and he wrote it about his first wife. He wrote the book of Proverbs really in his prime, when his wisdom was just kind of overflowing, and Solomon and just everything he had, he's following the Lord, and this wisdom is rolling off the tongue, and everybody's writing it down. But he writes Ecclesiastes in his 3rd phase of life. He's in the last third. And he's an old man now, and he's looking back because somewhere between the beginning and the end, Solomon had wandered away from the Lord. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. We could get into that. Maybe we will in this book a little bit. Oh, good job. So Solomon begins this experiment because he's trying to find meaning. You'll notice in the book how many times Solomon uses this phrase. He's looking for things that are under the sun. That means that he's living his life with his eyes down here instead of his eyes up there. And that clouds his view on what's important. So he starts out on this grand experiment to provide meaning. So he looks for things in his life like things he can accomplish, things he can enjoy, things he can build. Yeah.
Wealth, work. That's today.
That's right. Notice how many times whenever you read through this, how many times he said the word I or myself. So it's a very, very self-centered way of living. Matter of fact, this may contribute to why Solomon felt so empty, because it was all about him. And when a self-centered life, a self-focused life is a hollow life, because we're never willing to give up we're never willing to give up ourselves for the pursuit or the betterment of somebody else. And that's what he's figuring out. And so in verse number 10, he says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. You ought to underline that. That's a powerful verse. He says, everything in this world I wanted, I got. I didn't deny myself anything. And listen, each of us would know people that everything they want, they went after. Now, not a lot of us are going to get everything we want. Okay? You can't always get what you want. I knew you had the song. All right. But listen, Solomon was a special case. He's a king. He's a rich king. He's a wise king. He's a successful king. And so God allows him. He says, Solomon, you be the case study. Go get all you want. And anything else you find you want, you go after it and see where it gets you. I like what Tony Evans said here. He said, God doesn't mind your enjoyment of legitimate pleasures in life. He isn't upset that you like your job, your food, your possessions, your relationships. In fact, those are gifts from him. The problem comes when you look for meaning in those things, because at that point, you're trying to find your meaning in something that isn't designed to give you purpose. And so that's what Solomon's doing. Now you can imagine him. Look in verse number 11. He says, there was no profit under the sun. He said nothing on earth was enough. And so you can imagine him wondering, looking at his life and going, but is this all there is? And the next milestone he reaches, he goes, hold on, is this all there is? And so he pursues something else. He goes, this didn't do it either. Is this all there is to life? And so if you're looking for the meaning of life, you ought to write this down. If you're looking for the meaning of life in life, you're never going to find it. Okay? Now, look in verse number 14. This is where he starts. Now he's older, remember? And he says, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness, yet I perceive that the same event happens to them all. Well, what event is he talking about there? He's talking about death. He said, doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't matter how poor you are, you're going to die. Doesn't matter how dumb you are or how wise you are, you're going to die. It doesn't matter how successful you are, a prince or a pauper, you're all going to die. Tony Evans said it like this: whether you're buried in a crude wooden box or a stylish bronze casket transported by a limousine, dead is dead. A dead dummy and a dead genius are equally deceased. That just made it easy for me to understand. And so Solomon really does sound like he's spiraling in depression. Now, verse 16, he says, since all this will be forgotten in the days to come, how does a wise man die? He dies as the fool. Well, he's talking about death being the great equalizer, and he says, after all I've done and all I've accomplished, I'm going to end up like everybody else. And he is, I think he's legitimately struggling with depression. And look, not just depression, despair. Why? Because when you put all your eggs in the one basket of, I'm going to get everything I can out of life, and you figure out life is not enough to give you life, where else is your hope? This is hopelessness because it's life apart from God. That's what this chapter is about. It doesn't feel, he doesn't think it's fair that he has to be treated like everybody else because look how successful he is. And yet, time marches on. That's what chapter number 3 is going to be about tomorrow.
I was going to say, I shared yesterday how it's that same topic of self-focus. And you're talking about today, under the sun. He's focused on everything under the sun. In today's chapter, one of the things I took away is I must decrease so that God can increase. And if he's focusing on everything under the sun and he's focusing on self, he's not storing up the treasures for himself in heaven. He's storing them up on earth. And something that I've studied and thought about, the root sin, like back with Adam and Eve and the temptation of Satan, that root sin, if you think about their reaction after they sin, they're crawling along in the garden. That's how they do it with God. Yeah, with God, and they're happy and they're naked. Like that wasn't even a thing. But as soon as they sinned, remember, they ran and hid because they now have some kind of self-awareness that is part of this human sin nature that we unfortunately inherit. And so it's very easy for us to fall into that same trap of focusing on the things that are under the sun and not focusing on God, not focusing on storing up those treasures for ourselves in heaven. Yeah. And again, yesterday my takeaway was to focus on God. Today, that's my same takeaway. This is how you fight depression. This is like true battles that we struggle against on earth. God is the answer. Not to sound trite or silly or whatever, but literally like this is my therapy and this is what I go to help me in those moments, because it turns my focus off of me and onto God, the one who can fix these things. I
like that. I read a quote today. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who said it. I don't even know where I saw it. So don't quote me directly, but this was the idea. There is no Bible commentary. So a Bible commentary, just in case you don't know, is a book that just explains different verses of the Bible. So when you're studying, you're going, I don't know what that means. A Bible commentary, you open it up and you look at it and it goes, oh, here's what that verse, it explains it. Okay?
Someone commented on
these are someone's comments on the Bible. All right. So the quote was, there is no Bible commentary that can better explain the Bible to you than sickness and trouble.
Absolutely.
Because it's in those times, listen, I'm going to tell you, it's in those terrible times where the Bible comes alive in a way where you go, I finally see life for what it is. And so Solomon is figuring out everything else is vain, worthless, and empty. And he's got to figure out how do we recenter and figure out what life's all about. If you know anybody struggling with what is the purpose of life, the book of Ecclesiastes was written for them. All right, so keep reading. Tomorrow we'll read chapter number 3, which is probably the most famous passage in the whole book. Okay, we'll see you then.
To
bye.
Everything turn.
That's tomorrow. Okay.
Bye.